Welcome to Lento English. Ready to level up your English? Here we learn through stories, slow, clear, and fun. Listen, relax, and enjoy the journey.
1. Introduction. The world received sad news on April 21, 2025. Pope Francis, the leader of the Catholic Church, died. He was 88 years old. He had served as pope for a long time. Many people around the globe knew him and felt sad when they heard the news. He was the 266th person to be the pope. His death marked the end of an important time for the Church. Soon after his death, the Vatican shared the first plans for his funeral. The service was planned for April 26th, just a few days after he passed away. This gave people time to prepare and travel to Rome if they wanted to attend. Pope Francis lived a long life dedicated to service. He started his work many years ago. As Pope, he was known for trying to help poor people and talking about important world problems. He wanted to bring people together. News of the funeral spread quickly. People all over the world started to talk about it. Many television stations planned to show the funeral live. It was expected to be a very large event, watched by millions. This showed how much respect people had for Pope Francis. Leaders from many different countries announced they would travel to Rome for the service. This included presidents, kings, queens, and other important figures. Their presence would make it a truly global gathering. Among the well-known people planning to be there was former President Donald Trump from the United States. His decision to attend highlighted the importance of the event on the world stage. Many other famous leaders were also expected. The city of Rome started getting ready for all the visitors. Hotels became busy. Police planned security to make sure everything went smoothly and safely. It was a very big task to organize such an event. The funeral would be a time for sadness, but also for remembering. People would think about Pope Francis's life and his teachings. The world's attention would be focused on Rome and the Vatican. Thousands of ordinary people were also expected to come to the city. They wanted to be near, to show their respect and say a final goodbye. The atmosphere in Rome was expected to be quiet and respectful. Everyone understood this was a significant moment in history. The world prepared to watch the final farewell for a much-loved pope. 2. Who Pope Francis was. Pope Francis was the leader of the Catholic Church for many years. He was the 266th pope. He came from Argentina in South America. He was the first pope from that part of the world. Before becoming pope, his name was Jorge Mario Bergoglio. People around the world knew him. Pope Francis was also special because he was the first Jesuit pope. Jesuits are a group of priests in the Catholic Church. They belong to the Society of Jesus. Jesuits are known for helping people learn, often through schools. They also work as missionaries in many countries. They try to help people understand God. Being a Jesuit was important to Pope Francis. When he became pope, he chose the name Francis. This was a surprise. He did not choose a name like John or Paul. He chose Francis because of Saint Francis of Assisi. Saint Francis lived in Italy long ago. He loved poor people, nature, and animals. He lived a very simple life. Pope Francis wanted his time as pope to follow Saint Francis's example. Helping poor people was very important for Pope Francis. He spoke about the poor often. He wanted the church to be a poor church for the poor. He tried to live simply himself. He did not live in the large papal apartment. He chose simpler rooms instead. He often visited poor areas and met people who did not have much money or homes. He wanted everyone to care more about people in need. He believed this was a main part of being a Christian. Pope Francis led the Catholic Church for over 10 years. During his papacy, he traveled to many countries. He met with world leaders and ordinary people. He talked about peace and understanding between different groups. He also asked people to take better care of the earth. He wrote important letters about these subjects. He tried to make the church feel more open and welcoming. Many people liked his friendly way. Pope Francis also had a special love for the Virgin Mary, the mother of Jesus. Mary is very important in the Catholic faith. He often prayed to her for help. He believed she helped him in his life and work as pope. This strong connection to Mary was also part of why he chose a special place for his burial. 3. A special resting place. Pope Francis had a special idea for his final resting place. Most popes are buried inside the Vatican City. But Pope Francis wanted something different. He asked to be buried outside the Vatican walls. This was his personal wish, and it showed how he was different from many popes before him. He chose a very old and beautiful church in Rome for his burial. This church is the Basilica of Saint Mary Major. It is not inside the Vatican. It is located in the center of Rome. Choosing this church was an unusual decision for a pope. Why did he choose Saint Mary Major? Pope Francis had a great love for the Virgin Mary, the mother of Jesus. He often visited this basilica during his life to pray quietly. He felt very close to Mary in this special place. He even wrote about this in his will in 2022. He said he always trusted the Virgin Mary throughout his life and work. Inside the Basilica of Saint Mary Major, there is a very old and important painting of Mary. It is called Salus Populi Romani. This name means health of the Roman people. It is a famous icon. Many people believe Saint Luke painted it a very long time ago. This picture is also very important to the Jesuits, a group of priests in the Catholic Church. Pope Francis was the first Jesuit pope, so this icon and the Church held special meaning for him. Pope Francis lived a simple life, focused on helping the poor. He wanted his final resting place to match his life. He asked for a simple tomb. He wanted it to be in the ground, not high up or very decorated. He did not want a big monument. He only wanted one word written on his tomb, Franciscus. This is the Latin version of his name, Francis. This simple request showed how he lived, focused on faith and helping others, not on power or possessions. It is very rare for a pope to be buried outside the Vatican. The last pope buried outside was Leo XIII, over 100 years ago, in 1903. So, Pope Francis is the first pope since then to have his resting place outside the Vatican. He is also the first pope in more than 300 years to be buried specifically in the Basilica of Saint Mary Major. His choice makes his final resting place unique and very special. 4. Rome says farewell. After the big church service, the journey through Rome began. Pope Francis's simple wooden coffin was placed inside the special car called the Popemobile. This car would take him to his final resting place. The journey went through the heart of the city. It crossed the river Tiber, a famous river in Rome. The route also passed near the Colosseum, an old and important building known around the world. Thousands and thousands of people came out to watch. They stood along the streets to see the Popemobile pass one last time. The streets were full of people waiting quietly. In some parts of the city, the streets were very narrow. It felt like the people standing there could almost reach out and touch the car. This sometimes happened before when Pope Francis traveled through St. Peter's Square to greet people. Many people watching were very sad. You could see tears in their eyes as the car carrying the coffin went by. It was their final chance to say goodbye and to thank Pope Francis for his work. As the Popemobile moved slowly through the crowds, people started to clap their hands. It was a sound of respect and thanks for the Pope. The clapping followed the car along its route through the city. The feeling in Rome on this day was quiet and respectful. People felt sadness, but they also wanted to show their love for the Pope. They watched together as the city said its farewell. The journey showed how much people cared about him. Everyone watched as the Popemobile carried the Pope away from the Vatican area. Finally, the journey ended. The Popemobile arrived at the Basilica of St. Mary Major. This large, old church was the place Pope Francis chose for his burial. It was outside the Vatican walls in the city of Rome. The Pope's coffin was brought here, ready for the last part of the farewell. 5 important people come. Many people traveled to Rome from far away. They came for the funeral of Pope Francis. The city became very full and busy. People arrived from all over the world. They wanted to show their respect and say a final goodbye to the Pope. Large crowds gathered early in the morning. They filled the streets near the Vatican and waited patiently. You could see people of all ages. It was not only regular people who came to Rome. Many important people arrived for the funeral service. Leaders from many different countries traveled to Italy. They wanted to show respect for Pope Francis and his work. Former President Donald Trump from the United States was one guest. President Volodymyr Zelensky from Ukraine also came. Prince William, representing the United Kingdom, attended too. Dozens of other world leaders, presidents, prime ministers, and special guests were present. They joined the thousands of mourners to remember the Pope together. It showed Pope Francis was important to many people around the world. St. Peter's Square is a very large, famous place. It sits right in front of St. Peter's Basilica. Before the funeral service started, this huge square was full of people. Thousands waited quietly together. They stood under the open sky, looking towards the basilica. Many people held flags from their home countries or pictures of Pope Francis. It was a big global event, and many eyes watched Rome that day. People watched on television everywhere, but many felt it was special to be there. Being in the square felt important. It was a shared moment of sadness and respect for the Pope. The air was quiet but full of feeling. Reports said that a very large number of people were in Rome. Some estimated more than 250,000 people came to say farewell. Inside St. Peter's Square itself, there were about 50,000 people waiting for the service. Because so many people came, and because many important world leaders were guests, security was very strict. Many police officers and security staff worked hard. They made sure everyone was safe. They checked bags and kept pathways clear. It was a big job to manage the large crowds and protect all the special guests during this sad but important event. Everything needed to happen peacefully. Before the main funeral service began, some leaders had a short time to talk. Former President Trump met with President Zelensky. They spoke together inside St. Peter's Basilica before finding their seats. Mr. Zelensky later mentioned their conversation was serious and could be important. Pictures also showed them talking for a moment with other European leaders nearby, like the UK Prime Minister and the French President. These brief meetings happened quietly before the ceremony started. Soon, everyone turned their attention to the reason they were all there, to honor Pope Francis and attend his funeral service. 6. The church service. The funeral service for Pope Francis took place in St. Peter's Square under a clear sky. It was a very large gathering on this important day. Many thousands of people came to say their final goodbye. Around 50,000 people filled the square itself, standing close together. Many more watched from nearby streets and screens set up around the city. The total number of people showing respect was estimated at over 250,000. They stood quietly, a feeling of sadness mixed with respect in the air, waiting for the service to begin. The only sounds were soft talking and the distant bells of Rome. Cardinal Giovanni Battista Re, an important figure in the church, led the special service. He stood before the large crowd and the simple coffin. He spoke clearly about Pope Francis. Cardinal Re shared important messages about the Pope's life and work. He reminded everyone that Pope Francis touched minds and hearts. This means he had a strong effect on how people thought and felt about their faith and the world. The cardinal also explained that Pope Francis always wanted to build bridges, not walls. This simple idea showed the Pope's desire to help people, groups, and countries find ways to connect and understand each other, instead of creating distance or conflict. He worked hard for peace during his time as Pope. The service followed the old and serious traditions of the Catholic Church for a funeral. There were many prayers spoken and sung. Readings from the Bible offered words of comfort and hope. Incense smoke rose into the air, a traditional part of these services. Special church music played, adding to the solemn feeling of the day. People listened very carefully to the words spoken about Pope Francis. They thought about his kindness, his gentle smile, and his focus on helping others, especially those who had little. The plain wooden coffin was a powerful reminder of the simple way Pope Francis chose to live and lead. The mood in St. Peter's Square was very quiet and respectful. People were clearly sad about the loss, but also seemed thankful for the Pope's long life and his dedication to the Church. Many faces showed deep emotion. Among the huge crowds were ordinary people from Rome and visitors who had traveled far. Important leaders from many different countries were also present. Presidents, prime ministers, and royalty sat near the front, but they were part of the larger crowd sharing this moment of farewell. Everyone watched and listened together as the church said its final goodbye to Pope Francis. The service was a time for reflection, remembering his work and his lasting message of compassion, peace, and understanding in the world. It showed how many people felt connected to him before the service came to an end. 7. President Trump is there. Many important leaders from countries around the world came to Rome for the funeral of Pope Francis. Former President Donald Trump from the United States was one of these leaders. He traveled a long distance to be present. It was important for him to attend the Pope's funeral and show respect. His visit was watched by many people. Before the main church service started, President Trump had a special meeting. He met President Volodymyr Zelensky from Ukraine. This meeting happened inside St. Peter's Basilica. This is the very large and famous church where the service would soon take place. It was a quiet moment before the crowds filled the church and the square outside. President Zelensky spoke about this meeting later. He said it was a good talk with President Trump. He felt the meeting was important. He even used the word historic. He meant that maybe something very important could happen in the future if they worked together well after their talk. This showed their conversation was serious, more than just a quick hello. Mr. Trump did not only speak with President Zelensky during his time at the Vatican. He also talked with other world leaders who were there. A photograph showed him in a conversation with several leaders together. In the picture were President Zelensky, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer, and the President of France, Emmanuel Macron. They were all talking together inside the basilica before the service. Seeing these powerful leaders talk together was interesting for people watching the events in Rome. It showed that even during a sad event like a funeral, important discussions can happen between nations. As a former president of a very large and powerful country, Mr. Trump's visit received a lot of attention. People noticed who he spoke with and where he went. His presence was a significant part of the large international gathering for Pope Francis. He attended the funeral service with his wife, Melania Trump. They sat with other important guests and listened to the service. The funeral service was a major event. When it finished, President Trump and Melania Trump did not stay in Rome for a long time. They traveled to the airport quite soon after the service ended. Security officials helped them get to their plane safely. They boarded the special airplane used by the President of the United States, called Air Force One. The plane then departed from Rome. It flew them back to the United States. Because President Trump left Rome quickly after the funeral, he likely did not have time for many other private meetings with world leaders during this visit. His main activities in Rome were attending the important funeral service and having the meeting with President Zelensky. 8. Remembering the Pope. After the large church service at St. Peter's finished, Pope Francis's body began its last journey. He was dressed in red church clothes and wore a special papal hat. His simple wooden coffin was placed in the Pope-mobile. The car drove through the streets of Rome towards the Basilica of St. Mary Major. The route crossed the Tiber River and went past famous places like the Colosseum. Thousands of people stood along the roads. Some were crying, and many clapped their hands as the car passed. It was their final chance to say thank you and goodbye to Pope Francis. On April 26, 2025, Pope Francis was buried at the Basilica of St. Mary Major. This was his wish. He chose this church because he loved the Virgin Mary very much. Inside the church, there is a very old picture of Mary called the Salus Populi Romani. Pope Francis often visited this church to pray. He wrote in his will about his trust in Mary, the mother of Jesus. His choice of burial place was unusual. Most popes are buried inside the Vatican. Pope Francis was the first pope buried outside the Vatican since Pope Leo XIII, who died in 1903. He was also the first pope buried in St. Mary Major for more than 300 years. He asked for a very simple resting place. He wanted his tomb to be in the ground, not fancy. The only word on it is Franciscus, which is Latin for Francis. This simple burial matched the way Pope Francis lived his life. He chose the name Francis because of Saint Francis of Assisi, who helped poor people. Pope Francis also spent his time as pope trying to help the poor and build connections between people. Cardinal Giovanni Battista Re, who led the funeral service, said that Pope Francis touched minds and hearts. He said the Pope wanted to build bridges, not walls. Many people around the world felt sad when Pope Francis died. More than 250,000 people came to Rome for the funeral events. This large number showed how important he was to many people. Leaders from different countries came, and so did ordinary people. They all came to remember a pope known for his kindness and simple life. Pope Francis will be remembered in history as a leader who cared deeply for others and wanted a simpler church.